What if everything around you, your body, your breath, your very existence, was hanging by a thread? What if survival wasn't just difficult, but absolutely impossible? Today, you'll witness 10 mind-blowing stories of people who defied death itself. And number one, it's so unbelievable that you might wish you'd never heard it. Let's begin. Number 10, buried alive and still breathing. Imagine waking up in complete darkness. No air, no space, just dirt pressing down on your chest. You try to move, but there's no room. This was the terrifying fate of a man in Brazil who woke up inside his own grave. Doctors had declared him dead, his body was lowered into the ground and dirt was piled on top. But he wasn't dead. He was paralyzed. His heart beat so faintly that even medical tests failed to detect it. As mourners left the cemetery, he was still alive, trapped beneath 6 feet of soil. And then, the most horrifying part. His paralysis started wearing off. He could feel everything. But no one could hear his screams. How did he escape? The answer will send chills down your spine. A stray dog digging for food at the cemetery uncovered just enough of the grave for a local to see movement. Paramedics were called, and after 10 agonizing hours, he was pulled back from the dead. But here's the shocking twist. The hospital refused to admit him, fearing a supernatural curse. Number 9. The man who fell 18,000 feet without a parachute and walked away. You're 18,000 feet above the ground. You jump. The wind rushes past your face. You pull the cord, and nothing happens. You pull the backup. Still nothing. Now, you're plummeting at over 120 miles per hour. There's no way out. Death is certain. This was the nightmare faced by skydiver Alan McGee during World War II. Shot out of his plane, he had no choice but to free fall from the sky. But here's the mind-blowing part. Instead of crashing into the ground and dying instantly, he hit a glass ceiling. A train station's roof shattered beneath him, absorbing just enough impact to let him survive. And the craziest part, he stood up, covered in blood but alive. Doctors still can't explain how. Number 8, trapped underwater for 3 days in total darkness. Most people can't hold their breath for more than a minute. Imagine trying to stay alive for 72 hours, at the bottom of the ocean. Harrison Okene, a cook aboard a Nigerian tugboat, was asleep when his ship capsized in a violent storm. Within minutes, the boat sank 100 feet below the surface, trapping Harrison in an air pocket the size of a small closet. Darkness, cold. No food. No drinkable water. Just the sound of sharks circling the wreck. Rescue was impossible. No diver could have imagined anyone survived. But after 3 days, a deep-sea diving team, there to recover bodies, suddenly saw something move. A hand. Imagine their shock when that hand grabbed them. Harrison had been breathing trapped oxygen that should have run out long before. To this day, scientists can't explain how he survived. Number 7. The man who was struck by lightning. 7 times. You know the saying, lightning never strikes the same place twice? That's a lie. Because one man, Roy Sullivan, was struck by lightning not once, not twice, but 7 times. The first time it set his hair on fire. The second time it knocked him unconscious. The third time it blasted him out of his truck. The fourth, it burned his leg to the bone. The fifth, it threw him into a river. The sixth, it nearly stopped his heart. And the seventh, it made him the most unlucky, but somehow, the luckiest man in history. But here's the unsettling part. Roy wasn't just randomly hit. It was almost like something was hunting him. The day after his 7th lightning strike, he was chased by a bear. Roy Sullivan defied death more times than anyone should, but in the end it was his own fear of dying that haunted him the most. Number 6. The man who cut off his own arm to stay alive. Imagine being trapped, alone, no food, no water, and no way out. Your only choice? Cut off your own arm or die. This wasn't a movie. It was the real-life horror story of Aaron Ralston. He was climbing alone in a remote canyon when a 1,000-pound boulder fell, crushing his arm against the rock. He screamed for help. No one heard. For 5 days he drank his own urine to stay alive. He knew no one was coming. And so, he made an unthinkable decision. With a dull pocket knife, he began sawing through his own flesh. But here's the most horrifying part. He had to break his own bones before he could cut through the rest. After nearly an hour of slicing through nerves, muscle, and tendons, he was free. Bloodied, weak, but alive. And the insane twist. As soon as he walked away, a group of hikers found him and called for rescue. If he had waited just one more hour, he would have been saved. Please subscribe. Because hitting your subscribe button can give me new motivation to work harder and succeed. Number 5. The man who survived 2 nuclear bombs. Imagine this. You wake up, go to work, and by the end of the day, an atomic bomb has wiped out your entire city. Everything you know, vanished. You're burned, bleeding, barely breathing, but somehow, you're still alive. Now imagine escaping that city, only for another nuclear bomb to drop, right where you went to take shelter. This was the nightmare faced by Tsutomu Yamaguchi. On August 6, 1945, he was in Hiroshima when the first atomic bomb detonated. The explosion blinded him, shredded his skin, and threw him into a river. Somehow he survived. He crawled through hellfire and ash, found shelter, and made his way back home to Nagasaki. But just 3 days later, as he was explaining the blast to his boss, the second bomb fell. A second mushroom cloud. A second wave of unbearable heat. A second near-death experience. Yet, against every possible scientific explanation, he survived again. The insane part? He lived until 93 years old. His body had taken 2 nuclear blasts, yet he outlived many of the scientists who created the bomb. Fate? Luck? A miracle? You decide. Number 4. The woman who fell. 33,000 feet, and walked away. You're on a plane. Something's wrong. The engines explode. The cabin rips apart. And suddenly, you're falling. No parachute. No chance of survival. Just the sky swallowing you whole. This horrific moment became real for Vesna Vulovic, a flight attendant aboard a Yugoslav Airlines flight. A terrorist bomb detonated midair, and the plane exploded at 33,000 feet. Passengers were sucked into the sky. But Vesna? She was trapped in the tail section, which spiraled toward the ground at hundreds of miles per hour. The impact should have vaporized her body. But instead, a freak chain of events saved her. The wreckage landed on a snowy mountain cushioning the impact. A seat fell on top of her, shielding her from fatal injuries. Shock prevented her heart from stopping. Doctors were in total disbelief. She had no memory of the crash, but somehow she woke up weeks later in a hospital, alive. And the most shocking twist? She became famous but never feared flying again. Number 3. The man who lived without a heart for 555 days. Your heart is failing. Doctors have bad news. If they don't replace it immediately, you'll die. But there's a problem. There's no heart available. This was the grim reality for Stan Larkin, a young athlete whose heart stopped working due to a rare disease. But instead of waiting, doctors did something unthinkable. They removed his heart entirely. For 555 days, he lived without a heart inside his chest. No pulse, no heartbeat. Yet he walked, talked, and even played basketball. How? A backpack-sized artificial heart pumped his blood for nearly 2 years, keeping him alive until a real transplant became available. But here's the craziest part. Even after getting a new heart, he said he missed the machine. It had become a part of him. Number 2. The boy who survived having a javelin pierce his brain. Imagine running on a field, when suddenly a 6-foot-long metal spear is flying straight at your head. There's no time to react, no way to dodge, and before you can blink, it's inside your skull. This terrifying accident happened to a 17-year-old boy named Xavier Cunningham. He and his friends were playing near a churchyard, when suddenly, a javelin was launched toward him. It sliced through his eye socket and into his brain. Instant death, right? Wrong. He fell to the ground, fully conscious. He could still talk. He could still move his arms. And in absolute disbelief, his friends rushed to call for help. Doctors expected the worst. But somehow, the javelin had missed every major artery, every fatal nerve, and even avoided his brainstem by millimeters. Against all logic, he survived. And now here we are, at the final story, the most impossible survival of them all. Are you ready? Number 1. The man who survived being eaten alive. You're in the ocean. The water is calm. Then suddenly, everything goes dark, because you're inside the jaws of a whale. This wasn't a myth. It wasn't a fairy tale. It happened for real. Michael Packard, a professional diver, was swallowed whole by a humpback whale off the coast of Cape Cod. He didn't even see it coming. One moment he was swimming. The next, he was trapped inside a living, breathing prison. The pressure, the heat, the lack of oxygen. Everything pointed to one fate, a slow, crushing death. But then, something unbelievable happened. The whale rose to the surface, then spat him out. Why? Experts believe the whale realized its mistake. It had mistaken him for food, then realized he wasn't what it wanted. He hit the ocean surface, gasping for air, and lived to tell the tale. And now, you have lived through these insane survival stories. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more mind-blowing content like this, hit that subscribe button now. Because trust me, the next video, you won't believe what's coming.